Well, another year of cruising has come and gone as 2025 comes to an end, and may I be the very first to wish you a very happy new year. I'm excited about so many adventures that I have planned for 2026, but right now we're going to take a look back at 2025 and all the cruises that I took. And you might be wondering, why would I care about what cruises that you took in 2025? But it's simple. I hope that through the cruises that I took and some of the things I'm going to share about those cruises, that you might find your next cruise vacation. Maybe you'll be inspired for 2026 or even beyond. So in this video, I'm going to present to you the 8 cruises that I took in 2025, and I'm going to rank them from worst to best. And I say worst because I don't think any of the cruises that I went on are bad, but we're going to rank the 8 starting at number 8 and going all the way down to the best at number 1. Like everything I present on my channel, this is all subjective. It's all based upon my experience, and how I've ranked these is the full cruise experience in and of itself. So not necessarily the cruise ship or what I thought of it, but more of like the itinerary, the cruise ship, the food, the service, just really, when I looked at all these cruises as a whole, really where I put them in my mind based upon the experience that I had. So just keep that in mind. I'm not trying to bash any particular cruise ship. Like I said, these are all great cruises. Tell you a little bit about each ship and what I thought of the itinerary and the overall experience. But that's sort of everything combined and how I felt and just my experience of the entire trip is sort of what was the basis of how I rank these cruises. It's actually crazy to look at the stats, look back on the 8 cruises I took in 2025, because those 8 cruises, they were across 4 different cruise lines. I sailed with Celebrity Cruises, I sailed with Norwegian Cruise Line, I sailed with Virgin Voyages, and I sailed with Royal Caribbean. But those 8 cruises were made up of 52 nights at sea. And 52 nights at sea is roughly equal to about 7.5 weeks, which equates to nearly 2 months at sea, and thinking about that is quite staggering. And on these 8 cruises, I left from 5 unique embarkation ports, and I visited on these cruises 18 unique ports of call across 9 countries for a total of 14,313 nautical miles sailed, which equals about 16,471 statute miles, and 31,330 miles flown to and fro these cruises to get to all the different places in the world that I sailed this year. So it's been a really good year in travel. And actually, I'm going to give you one more stat about this year in travel, but I'm going to give it later in the video because I'm actually going to tell you exactly how much 8 cruises cost me. I've broken it down to the penny, and I'm going to give you that amount later in the video, so stick around for that. But let's dive right on in. And coming in at number 8 is a 3-day cruise I took on board the Celebrity Silhouette. And I was so excited to sail on board Celebrity Silhouette because it completed the Celebrity Solstice series of ships for me. And I do appreciate those ships. I've sailed them all over the world, and Celebrity Silhouette was a beautiful ship. I had a really good time on this cruise. Actually, like I said, a 3-day cruise, but it visited Key West in Florida and also Bimini in the Bahamas. And so it was a port each day, weekend cruise, leaving on a Friday from Fort Lauderdale and returning on a Monday morning back to Fort Lauderdale. So you might say, well, why is it last on the list? And not for anything bad. It's just thinking about all the other cruises that I had to rank. A little 3-day cruise doesn't mean as much as some of the bigger cruises that I went on around the world this year. But this itinerary is perfect. If you want to go on a weekend getaway, I absolutely love Key West. I think it's a fantastic place to visit if you've not been there before. Of course, it's part of the U.S., which is pretty cool. You're just leaving Florida to go to Florida, and you don't actually travel that far overnight. They've got really good food there. In fact, while I was there, I did a walking food tour. And then the next day we were in Bimini, Bahamas. And that's one of my favorite places to visit because unlike Nassau, which is so busy, you go to Bimini and it's not built up hardly at all. There's no huge port area. It's a really nice place to visit. But the Celebrity Silhouette itself was a beautiful ship, and I think it's one of the most complete Solstice Series ships because it's been completely renovated. So all the staterooms on board this ship have been renovated. So they all have that modern elegance that the Celebrity Edge Series ships have. I really enjoyed that about the ship. The food, of course, you can't go wrong with food on board Celebrity Cruises. The service was top notch. So a really good cruise on board Celebrity Silhouette. And speaking of adventure, you know how I'm always talking about booking cruises and flights? Well, there's another kind of travel risk associated with these things that most people never think about, and that's your personal data traveling around the internet. Did you know that every time you book something, sign up for a loyalty program, or even just search for deals online, data brokers are potentially collecting and selling that information without your permission? And I'm talking about data like your name, your email address, your phone number, your home address, you name it. And that's exactly why I've begun using Incogni. Incogni is a service that scans the web for your personal info and automatically sends removal requests to data brokers and people search sites on your behalf. And the best part, it doesn't just send one request and stop. Incogni actually keeps resending stop requests over time so your data doesn't resurface again. If you ever find your info somewhere that's not already in their automated list, Incogni lets you submit custom removal requests, so their team will work to get that data taken down too. I've dropped my unique link in the description below. If you click that link and use code ZachTravel, you're going to save 60% off an annual plan with Incogni. Set it up in just a few clicks and let Incogni keep your digital footprint under control while you focus on the adventure. And speaking of the adventure, coming in at number 7 is Royal Caribbean's brand new ship, Star of the Seas. Now, I booked Star of the Seas and was really excited about it because I had my first mega ship experience earlier in 2025, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But this was my first Icon series ship, and after seeing so many cool things about Icon of the Seas, I was so excited. These ships look so colorful, and I just knew it was going to be such a great cruise. And while I did like the ship, I enjoyed exploring it and everything, I just realized it wasn't for me. I feel like Star of the Seas is a lot more family oriented and family focused, so if you've got kids, it's going to be perfect. You're absolutely going to love it, and I actually recommend it for families because they have the huge water park with all the slides up on the top decks. They actually have the hideaway on the very back of the ship, which is the adult only retreat, but it was a really cool ship. All the different neighborhoods I enjoyed exploring. Of course, Central Park, one of my favorite places on Star of the Seas, and all of the mega ships that Royal offers. But I just kept finding that everything felt just for the family, and as a solo cruiser, it wasn't quite the relaxing, laid-back cruise experience that I typically go for. So, wasn't a huge fan of Star of the Seas, but this 4-night preview cruise left from Port Canaveral and only had one stop, so we actually had a couple of sea days where we were just sort of doing donuts out there in the Atlantic Ocean, but we just went down to Perfect Day at Coco Cay, which is Royal Caribbean's private island in the Bahamas, and I did enjoy getting to sail on board Star of the Seas, but unfortunately, I don't know that I will return to an Icon Series ship, at least not anytime soon, because I just didn't love the experience. Again, the ship just feeling like it was more for families versus being for solo cruisers. Coming in at number 6 is another brand new ship that debuted this year, and in fact, I was on her very first cruise. I'm talking about the Celebrity Xcel, and you might be shocked if you've watched my videos before to see a celebrity cruise ship this low on the list, but unfortunately Celebrity Xcel just did not meet the mark for me, and I've always said that the Celebrity Edge series ships, which Celebrity Xcel is part of, she's actually the 5th in that series of ships, it's just so much different than the other Edge series ships. It still has, a lot of the same modern elegance, of course. It still has the beauty that those ships have, but they've made a lot of changes. In fact, 7 new areas, the most notable being the Bazaar, which took the place of Eden in the very back of the ship, and I just didn't connect with the Bazaar. I didn't find it to be very relaxing. I actually found it to be a step back. It made the Celebrity Edge series ship seem not great, and it wasn't relaxing. I usually like to go back into Eden on the other Edge series ships and just relax and enjoy myself, but I didn't find myself doing that on Celebrity Xcel. They've also added a couple new food venues, one of them being in the Bazaar. It's actually the Mosaic restaurant. I found it to be just like the Eden restaurant, but with a much steeper price tag on it. And then also Bora, which has replaced the Rooftop Garden Grill. I ate dinner at Bora and also brunch at Bora. Didn't much care for dinner, but enjoyed the brunch a little bit better. So, just was not a fan of the ship itself, and I think because it was such a huge departure from some of the other Edge series ships, I'd much prefer to go on Celebrity Ascent, or maybe even Celebrity Beyond, some of the older Edge series ships versus going on Xcel, and I certainly don't have plans to go on that ship again. Now, this was a preview cruise. It was a 4-day cruise leaving Fort Lauderdale. We had 2 sea days, and we stopped in Cozumel. Overall, it was a fine cruise. I always enjoy sailing with Celebrity. I always enjoy being on an Edge series ship, but when I compared it to the other ships, and I had just been on Celebrity Apex a couple weeks prior for about 2 weeks, it just doesn't measure up. So not a big fan of Celebrity Xcel, and that's why it comes in only at number 6 on this list. Now coming in at number 5 is a ship that wowed me, and I'm talking about Royal Caribbean's Utopia of the Seas. I sailed on her back in March when she was still fairly new. She's sailing out of Port Canaveral. It was a 3-night cruise, left on a Friday, returned on a Monday morning, and we had stops in Perfect Day at Coco Cay and in Nassau. And I tell you, I really enjoyed Utopia of the Seas. This was my first mega ship experience. And for years, a lot of my viewers have been saying, Zach, when are you going to try out a mega ship? What's a mega ship like? We got to know what you think of Royal's mega ship. So was finally able to get on one with Utopia of the Seas, and was proud to do so because it was a new ship, but also because I wanted the mega ship experience. And boy, oh boy, was I in for a treat, because I absolutely loved Utopia of the Seas. I loved all the neighborhoods on board the ship, particularly the boardwalk. And I love the boardwalk because you could go out there and they had all the restaurants out there. It's the open air concept. And at the very back, they actually had the Aqua Theater where they had the amazing show. I mean, I've never seen a show like that. I'm sure most people haven't. When you go on those Oasis series ships and you see that show on the back of the ship, I mean, they're doing high dives from way up there into this little tiny pool. Meanwhile, the ship is moving, sailing at sea. It was just astonishing to me. But I loved the boardwalk so much. I think that's why I didn't like Star of the Sea so much, because they had changed the Aqua Theater back there and moved that up into the Aqua Dome on the inside. And it just wasn't as big. It wasn't as great. So they made a lot of changes to Star that made it a lot less great than what Utopia was. I enjoyed the dining on Utopia. I was able to go to the Mason Jar for a specialty brunch one day and really enjoyed that. Most of the food that I ate on the ship I enjoyed. I enjoyed all the grab and go options that they had for food all around the ship. So really enjoyed my time on board Utopia of the Seas, and I would absolutely sell it again, or her Oasis class sisters. And I would encourage you, if you maybe have a curiosity about these mega ships, to try out Utopia of the Seas. She's certainly the newest of the Oasis series ships, and she is selling on these 3 and 4 day itineraries. Coming in at number 4 was a huge cruise that I took this year, and actually I booked this cruise I think 2 or 3 years ago to go with friends, and finally 2025 was the year I got to go on it, and it was my second transatlantic voyage. When I planned it, it was actually going to be my first, but something else happened and went on another transatlantic voyage earlier in the year, which we'll talk about in just a bit. But the Celebrity Apex, it was a 13-night cruise leaving Southampton in the UK, stopping a few places over in Europe. We stopped a place in Spain, we stopped a place in Portugal, we stopped in the Azores, then we came all the way across the Atlantic, stopped in Bermuda, and ended in Orlando, Florida. It was actually Celebrity Apex's first time in Orlando, or Port Canaveral, because that's going to be her new home port. First time that Ed Sheery's ship has been home ported in Port Canaveral, so it was cool to bring her in there. But had a really good time, and I sailed on this cruise with friends, so this is more of a laid-back trip for me. I actually did a video talking about the full transatlantic experience, so go back and watch that. I'll link that up here in an info card somewhere so that you can see that video. If you've not done a transatlantic before, let me tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. So if you're someone who likes to go and have a party atmosphere, a party vibe, you're probably not going to find that on a transatlantic voyage. Certainly not on Celebrity Cruises. It is an older crowd, and it is a more laid-back, relaxed experience. So think getting up during the day, going out, sipping some tea, that's like the highlight of your day, right? Maybe you go to the show in the evening, have some dinner, and then retire to bed early. That's the vibe on these transatlantic voyages. But it's a perfect way to relax, and I do highly recommend them. And of course, Celebrity Apex is a beautiful ship. In fact, I'll still say that she's probably my favorite cruise ship. That's because she was my first experience with Celebrity Cruises, and just sailing on her again, she was recently out of a dry dock. She's a beautiful ship, still such a great ship. So really enjoyed sailing on Celebrity Apex, and it would have been higher on my list, but I just went on some incredible cruises this year, and that's why she comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is a huge cruise that I took this year to one of my favorite places on earth. A couple years ago, I was fortunate enough to go for the very first time to Japan, and in 2025, I was like, I have to go back to Japan and have to see more of it. So I found this perfect itinerary on board the Norwegian Spirit. It was a 10-day itinerary departing from Tokyo, and then it actually ended over in Seoul, South Korea. And we stopped a port every day on this cruise. So not a lot of time to spend on the ship, and that was okay because I was so happy to be back in Japan. Flew into Tokyo a couple days early and got to explore a lot of Tokyo, and then have 10 days traveling around the beautiful country of Japan. And y'all, if you've never been to Japan before, let me just encourage you right now to book a trip and go. I promise you it's worth that long flight there and back. You're going to love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful country, and it's a perfect country to cruise around because the ports are so close together. You can get about a port every day in, which in my opinion, it just maximizes the cruise experience, right? Because you're getting to see a lot of a place in just a short amount of time. And the Norwegian Spirit was a great cruise ship. She's a smaller cruise ship. In fact, she's the oldest ship in the Norwegian Cruise Line fleet. So it was great to sail on her. They had done a major refurbishment of her, $100 million refurbishment of her in 2019 or 2020, somewhere around that time. So fantastic cruise experience on board her. I love sailing with Norwegian Cruise Line and getting to see so much of Japan. It was such a great experience. And coming in at number 2 was another new ship. I'm talking about the Brilliant Lady, which is the brand new ship from Virgin Voyages. I sailed on her mermaiden voyage from New York City back in September. And this was a 5-day cruise out to Bermuda. So we had a couple sea days. We were in Bermuda overnight, and then we had a sea day back. And it had been a couple years. This was only my second time ever sailing with Virgin Voyages, but it had been a couple years since the last time I sailed with them. So it was really good to be back on one of their lady ships and to be reminded of just how differently Virgin does cruising. They try to make everything different on their ships, different from the other cruise lines, because they're one of the newest cruise lines out there. So they kind of had to, by the time they got to market, they had to be offering something different than what everyone else was. And certainly the dining is one of the highlights and one of the ways that they do things different. They have 6 unique restaurants on board those ships, and those are the main dining rooms, and they're all included. That's the best thing about Virgin Voyages, is that all the food on all their ships is included. So you don't have to worry about up charges to go to specialty dining. And I think the ships are beautiful. At first glance, the first time they came out with Scarlet Lady, I think several years ago, when I first saw the cruise ship and the concept drawings, I was like, that's ugly. It's a lot of gray, it's a lot of red on the inside. But now that I've sailed a couple of these ships, I have a real appreciation for the beauty of these ships, how well they've been laid out. There's certain areas of the ships that I call an adult playground, because they literally have on one of the top decks swings out there and seesaws, and they have a basketball court. Really cool things. They have a walking track on the very top deck of the ship, which is a great place to go and get pictures and video of the sunset and whatnot. So really enjoy Virgin Voyages. Also really enjoy their entertainment. And I think some of the entertainment that they had on board Brilliant Lady was some of the best that I've seen pretty much anywhere. They had a show called Murder in the Manor. The Manor is kind of the club, but it's also one of the main venues for shows. And this was kind of a whodunit style show. And let me tell you, every time they had this show, the line was out the door and around the ship for people trying to get in here. And they offered it several times throughout the cruise. That's one of the cool things that Virgin does about their entertainment. You're going to find entertainment going on and their main production shows going on throughout the day, even on a sea day. So they offer entertainment all the time. And like I said, all that food, which is included, is great too. I love Virgin Voyages. I loved Brilliant Lady. I love the stateroom that I had. I had a solo insider room. The first time I'd ever stayed in one of these rooms designed specifically with solo cruisers in mind on Virgin Voyages, and I fell in love with that room. The way that the bed was positioned, kind of in this little nook behind the bathroom, was just perfect. So I highly recommend, if you've not sailed with her before, and remember, Virgin Voyages is adults only. To me, that's one of the great things about Virgin Voyages. There's no kids on board, but I know for some people who might have to take the kids, that might be a limitation for you. So just keep in mind, Virgin Voyages is adults only. But if you're a solo cruiser, if you're a younger cruiser looking for other younger people to go on a cruise with, then you're really going to enjoy Virgin Voyages. They're offering something different, something for everyone, something for people of all ages, certainly. But you have to try out Virgin Voyages if you've not been with them before. And I highly recommend Brilliant Lady, because not only is she a beautiful ship, but she's also the newest ship in their fleet. And one more cruise ship to go on this list. What do you think it will be? Coming in at number 1, my favorite cruise that I took this year is the Norwegian Aqua. And this was the maiden voyage of the Norwegian Aqua, the newest ship from Norwegian Cruise Line. She's a Prima Plus series ship, and a little bit distinguished from the Norwegian Prima series because she's a little bit bigger. Some of the venues are a little bit different. They made some tweaks with Norwegian Aqua and set sail on the ship for her transatlantic voyage. Like I mentioned earlier, a transatlantic voyage I didn't anticipate going on in 2025, but when I saw this cruise and at the price it was offered for a solo traveler, I knew I had to book it, and I'm so glad that I did. Got to Southampton to set sail on her, flew overnight to London, and then took a car down to Southampton, got to the terminal, and they announced that the 7-day cruise that I had booked that was departing from Southampton and ending in Boston was now going to be a 10-day cruise because of weather over the Atlantic that we had to go around. We had to go south to go around this weather, and it was going to end in New York City. And my first thought was, I don't know if I can do this because I've never done a transatlantic before, and this was going to be a 7-day cruise originally of all sea days. Now it's going to be a 10-day cruise of all sea days, and that's 9 days at sea if you're counting at home. But I ended up loving it. It was a perfect experience. Again, all sea days, you have to just really love cruising to do that because it's a lot of time on board the ship. But Norwegian Aqua is a beautiful ship. It has beautiful staterooms. I had a balcony stateroom on the ship. Delicious food all around the ship, including the Indulge Food Hall, which I am such a fan of. I have sailed on Norwegian Prima previously back in 2024 and loved that ship and loved the food on her, mainly because of the Indulge Food Hall. So couldn't wait to try it out again on Norwegian Aqua and ended up loving it. So such a fantastic food experience, and they have so many specialty restaurants that you can dine at on board Norwegian Aqua. So many cool spaces. One of my favorite places on the ship is Deck 8, the outer deck, where they have the Ocean Boulevard. They have a couple of infinity pools out there. They have a lot of outdoor areas. They have a walking track that goes all the way around the outside of the ship. They have the Aqua slide on the very top of the ship, which is the first Aqua coaster at sea. So just really cool what Norwegian Aqua is doing. And these ships are so beautiful. I find them really similar to Celebrity's Ed Sheeran ships because they have such a modern elegance about them. But at the same time, they offer something for everyone because they have the beautiful offerings inside. And then you have the roller coaster water slide up there, like for the kids. So there's something for the kids, there's something for the adults, there's something for everyone in between. They even had some interactive putt-putt on the very top deck, which I really enjoyed also. So really enjoyed sailing on board Norwegian Aqua and having 10 days to do so. It was a fantastic cruise experience. And one of the other things about this cruise that I have to mention, I had the Vibe Beach Club. This is you have to pay a little bit extra for this, but it's an exclusive area only to people who have paid for it. They have plush loungers back there. They have a bar back there just for the people that have access to the Vibe Beach Club, and it was fantastic to have it on this 10-day crossing. So a really good cruise experience. I'm so glad that it got extended. It got extended for free, and just really love sailing on board Norwegian Aqua. And I highly recommend that cruise to you. Highly recommend a transatlantic on one of these ships. And in fact, Norwegian Luna is coming out in March of 2026. If you want to get on that transatlantic, I highly recommend that you do. I think they're doing a 13-day this year, though. So really fantastic ships to sail on board, and that is why Norwegian Aqua and my 10-day transatlantic voyage on her was my #1 cruise of 2025. And now for the big question, which I teased up at the top. How much does it cost to sail on 8 cruise ships in 1 year? Well, my total for these 8 cruises came out to be $12,403.62. And that's made possible for viewers like you. So thank you so much for watching my videos, for supporting my channel, and allowing me to go on so many cruises in 1 year. I love making the content that I'm able to make here on YouTube. I love having an audience like you that watches and responds in the comments and tells me what you think about the videos, about the ships I go on. I love the community that we forged here. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all the support that I've had in 2025. And in fact, 2025 was my best year yet on YouTube, and I'm so proud of that. I crossed 50,000 subscribers this year, and I have you to thank for that, and I never lose sight of that. So thank you for watching my videos. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this video. What do you think of how I've ranked my experiences? Let me know. Also, let me know in the comments, what adventures are you looking forward to taking in 2026? And y'all, I have some very exciting ones coming up very, very soon. I mean, we're kicking it off strong in January. So you want to make sure you stick around because we're going to go on some really cool ships, stay in some really cool staterooms, have some really cool experiences in some really cool places in 2026. I'm so excited. I almost spilled the beans just now because I'm that excited to tell you, but I'll just show you. How about that? So make sure you come back and see where I end up in 2026. But I hope all of you have a fantastic new year. Whatever adventures await us, I hope you have a very pleasant and peaceful 2026. And again, thank you so much for adventuring along with me all 2025 long. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please go down below, give me a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next adventure.